Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Yud Daled Amud Aleph, 14a of Maseches Brachos. We are starting 3 lines from the bottom of the page. The Gemara quotes the Mishnah, which discusses what is considered being aprakim between the paragraphs. So we had a discussion previously about what kinds of interruptions are permitted either in the middle of the paragraphs or between the paragraphs of the Brachos of Shema and of Shema itself. And we saw that between paragraphs is more lenient than in the middle of the paragraphs themselves. But what is considered in between a paragraph when it comes to the Brachos of Shema and Shema itself? So the Mishnah had said, back on Yud Gimel Amud Aleph 13a, the Mishnah said, The Mishnah said, Elohein bein aprakim, this is what's considered between the paragraphs, being bracha rishona lishnia, between the first bracha of Shema and the second. So the first one, Yotzer Hamaoros and Avar Abba, right in between there is being aprakim, between the paragraphs. Lishnia, ben shnia lishema, between Habocher B'Amo Yisrael B'Ahava, the second bracha, and Shema. Ben Shema leVahaya, between the first paragraph of Shema and the second of Vahaya im Shema, Vahayim Shema. Ben Vahayim Shema leVayomer, between the second paragraph and the third paragraph Vayomer. Ben Vayomer leEmes v'Yatziv, and between Vayomer and the paragraph after Shema, which is Emes v'Yatziv. And Rabbi Yehuda said, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, being Vayomer Emes v'Yatziv ulo yafsik, that no, you should not interrupt between Vayomer and Emes v'Yatziv. That's not a being aprakim, that's not considered between the paragraphs, or at least you shouldn't interrupt. Says the Gemara, back our Gemara now, Amar Rabbi Abo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Halacha ki Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha, Rabbi Abo says, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, the halacha is in accordance with this second opinion, Rabbi Yehuda, the Amar, who said, being Elokeichem le'emes v'Yatziv lo yafsik, that you should not interrupt between Ani Hashem Elokeichem and Emes v'Yatziv. So just to understand, in the parsha itself, in Parsha Shlach, where we have the paragraph of Vayomer, the parsha of Tzitzis, so again, it concludes, Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I am Hashem your God. Emes v'Yatziv is another paragraph, not from the Torah, it's a composition of the sages. So, but Rabbi Yehuda says, and the Gemara says, that's the halacha, you should not interrupt between Ani Hashem Elokeichem and the word Emes. Amar Rabbi Abo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Abo said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, my time made Rabbi Yehuda. What is Rabbi Yehuda's reason? Why do we want to go straight from the words Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I am Hashem your God, to the word Emes? Because there is a verse in Yirmiyah which says, Vashem Elokim Emes, and Hashem, God, is truth. So it's a way of describing Hashem as Emes, and there's a pasuk that joins those together, so we don't want to interrupt. I mean, all of these are descriptions, Emes v'Yatziv, and Acham, and Kaim v'Yashar. So it's actually discussion, is it relating back to describing Hashem, or is it talking about what it's going to talk about Hashem's word, Hashem's promise afterwards? Maybe it's going on both, but because of this pasuk in Yirmiyah, we want to capture the idea of the pasuk in Yirmiyah of Hashem Elokim Emes, so we should not interrupt between Ani Hashem Elokeichem and the word Emes. Ask the Gemara, Choser ve'omer Emes or Eno Choser ve'omer Emes? Do you then repeat the word Emes or not? Because on the one hand, the word Emes is modifying, is explaining the word Hashem. Ani Hashem Elokeichem Emes, I am Hashem your God, who's true. On the other hand, it's Emes v'Yatziv v'Nacham v'Kaim v'Yashar v'Ne'eman Hadavar Hazeh, the matter. It's talking. It's modifying. It's explaining the words that follow. So should you repeat the word Emes again? Emes for what preceded, and Emes for what follows it. So Amar Rabbi Abo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Again, we have Rabbi Abo in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, and he says, Choser ve'omer Emes. One should repeat the word Emes again. Rabba Amar, Rabba says, some have a girsa Rava, Eino choser ve'omer emes. You don't repeat the word emes. That is the halacha, that we don't repeat the word emes, we just have it once. Hahu denachis kamei de Rabba. There was a person who went before Rabba. Shamei Rabba da'amar emes emes. Trei zimni. Rabba heard him say the word emes twice. Rabba who says you shouldn't say it twice. He heard this guy saying it twice. Amar Rabba. Rabba says, Kol emes tafsei lahai. So, kind of like he got grabbed by the eagerness to say the word emes. There's a question of the girsa here, that maybe it should say, so there's a Rashash here. The Rashash discusses this, what exactly Rabba was saying. It's not so clear what he was saying. The Rashash says that the word, you can interpret the word kol. So, right, he said, kol emes tafse. What does the word kol mean? The Rashash suggests kol usually means all. But in this context, he says that it means kriya v'dibur, like reading and speech. Because like the word lo selech rachil ba'amecha, right? Don't bear tails. Rachil is like a tail bearer. So there we have the word rachil from the word kol to do with speech and speaking. So Rabbi was saying the reading of the words emes tafse grabbed him. He got caught up in it. Alternatively, the Rashash suggests maybe instead of saying the word kol, it should say the word baal, beis lam, instead of kaf lamed, and it would mean in this context thought. He says that sometimes that word can mean thought or idea. That he was thinking about the idea of emes, and therefore it came out twice. But either way, Rabba who says you should only say it once, he's trying to justify this person who said it twice and say, oh, he didn't, either it came off the mouth that way, or he was thinking so much about it, he said it. But one should really only say the word emes once. Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef said, Kama malya hashmaitza. How wonderful is this teaching, the teaching that's about to follow. Diki Asr Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda. Amar, when Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda he said, Amri b'ma'arava. They say in the West, they say in Eretz Yisrael. When he came to Babel, he said, they say in Eretz Yisrael, Arvis, that in Ma'ariv, you should say the following. In the third paragraph of Shema, now in the evening, nighttime is not a time for tzitzis. So, right, because it says, so you should see it. And you don't see it at night, it's dark, so it's not a time for tzitzis. So in Shema, for the third paragraph, you don't need to mention tzitzis. Now, there's other important things to mention there, like Yetzias Mitzrayim. You have to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Exodus. So you should read, Daber al b'nei Yisrael v'marta alehem. Speak to b'nei Yisrael and say to them. Now, what actually follows in the pasuk is v'asu lahem tzitzis. They should make tzitzis. But you should skip that in the evening, and you should skip right to Ani Hashem Elokeichem emes. Skip to the words Ani Hashem Elokeichem emes. So that was the amazing teaching that Rav Yosef said that you should, that they say that what Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda brought from Eretz Yisrael is that at Ma'ariv you should say Vayomer Hashem Moshe Daber al b'nei Yisrael, speak to b'nei Yisrael and Martel and say to them Ani Hashem Elokeichem emes, and skip the whole middle that talks about tzitzis. Amar le Abaye said to Rav Yosef, "My mal yusa, what's so great about that teaching? It's wrong. V'ha amar Rav Kahana amar Rav. Rav Kahana said in the name of Rav, lo yaschil. You shouldn't even start the third paragraph. The third paragraph which deals with tzitzis, you shouldn't say it in the evening. You shouldn't say it at Ma'ariv. V'im hischil gomer. But if you started, then you should finish it. But you shouldn't really start it. Now, maybe you'll say that maybe it's not considered that you really started it. To say that's not considered starting it. That's not really getting into the kishkas of the paragraph. So that's why it's a great idea, because you say without starting it. And if you don't start it, then you don't have to read the whole thing. And you shouldn't read the whole thing. So maybe you'll suggest that saying V'amarta lehem is not considered starting it. Well, that's not true. V'amar Shmuel bar Yitzchak amar Rav. Shmuel bar Yitzchak said in the name of Rav, Daber al b'nei Yisrael lo v'yaskala. If you just say Daber al b'nei Yisrael, that's not considered starting. But V'amarta lehem, but once you say the words V'amarta lehem and say to them Haveyaskala, that's considered that you started it. You got into the paragraph, and once you get into it, you have to mention tzitzis. So what's so beautiful about this teaching? And it seems to be incorrect. If you say Daber al b'nei Yisrael V'amarta lehem, then you should have to say the whole parsha of tzitzis, and you shouldn't be able to skip Tani Hashem Elokechem. So Amar Papa response said, he answered Kasabri b'marava. It must be they hold in Eretz Yisrael. Then no. If you say the words Amarta lehem, that's also, you haven't started yet. And you don't have to say the whole paragraph. Until you say the words and they should make for themselves tzitzis, you haven't really started it. If you say V'asu lahem tzitzis, then you started. Then you have to say the whole thing. But if you just said V'amarta lehem, Daber al b'nei Yisrael V'amarta lehem, that's not starting. And you could skip to the end and say Ani Hashem Elokechem emes. Amar Abaye. Abaye said, Hilkach, so therefore, if that's what they do in Eretz Yisrael, so anan aschuli maschalinan, we're also going to say the beginning, Dika maschli b'marava. We want to be consistent with what they do in Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, they say Daber al b'nei Yisrael v'amarta lehem. So we want to do what they do. So we're going to do that too. But b'kiman daschalinan, but since we started and we consider v'amarta lehem as having started, Migmar nami gamrinan. So then we're going to finish off. We're going to say the whole thing. Ta'amar Rav Kahana Amar Rav. Because Rav Kahana said in the name of Rav, Lo yaschil, you shouldn't start the third paragraph. In hischil, gomer. And once you start though, you should finish and read the whole thing. So we shouldn't really start, but they start in Eretz Yisrael. So we're going to start it too. Now they don't consider Amarta lehem as having really started, so they don't require you to mention the parsha of tzitzis. You could skip to the end. But we consider Amarta lehem as having started. Once we started, we have to say the whole thing. We're going to say the whole parsha of tzitzis. And indeed, that's what we do. And that's what everybody does now. We say the whole third paragraph, even at night. Chia barav Amar. Chia barav said, Amar Ani Hashem Elokechem, tzarech lomar emes. If you say the words Ani Hashem Elokechem, so then, meaning, if you said the third paragraph, if you say the third paragraph of Shema, so then you need to say emes. And by emes he means emes v'yatzav, the next paragraph. Lo amar ani Hashem Elokechem, but if you don't say the third paragraph of Shema, eino tzarech lomar emes, then you don't have to say the next paragraph of emes v'yatzav. Where really it's emes v'emunah, because where it's in Meir we say emes v'emunah. So you don't have to say the next paragraph of emes v'emunah. Now, one problem. V'habayi lad kuri tzias mitzrayim. But you have to mention the Exodus. So you either have to say the third paragraph of Shema, because that mentions the Exodus. Ani Hashem Elokechem asher hotziis yischem me'eretz Mitzrayim, I am Hashem who took you out of Egypt. And at the very least, if you're not going to say that, then you have to say the paragraph of emes v'emunah, because that also mentions the Exodus. But to say neither of them, then you're going to be without mentioning the Exodus. And we know that you need to mention Yitzias Mitzrayim Balelos. You have to mention Yitzias Mitzrayim at nighttime as well. You're going to be left with it. If when you don't say the third paragraph of Shema, you also don't have to say emes v'emunah, then you're not going to mention the Exodus, Yitzias Mitzrayim at all. That's a problem. So he says to Amar Hachi, no, you'll just say the following. Modim anachnu lecha Hashem Elokeinu. We are thankful to you, Hashem, our God, Shotzeisanu me'eretz Mitzrayim, who took us out of Egypt, Uftisanu beis avadim, and redeemed us from a house of slavery. Ve'asiso lanu nisim ukuros al hayam, and you did miracles for us. V'sharnu lach, and we sang to you. And Rashi says that means you then go on and say, Mi kamocha b'olam Hashem, who's like you, like we say at Ma'ariv, Machuscha rovanecha, our children, our people saw your kingship, Gal Yisrael, Hashkivenu, the whole thing. But the paragraph of emes v'emunah, you can make an abridged version where you just mention Yitzias Mitzrayim, and thank Hashem for it, and that suffices. So that would be what would be if you don't say the third paragraph of Shema. We do say the third paragraph of Shema, and we say the whole paragraph of Emes V'Emunah. Okay, now we go back to the next part of the Mishnah, and the next part of the Mishnah discussed the order of the 3 paragraphs of Shema. And it said, and it asked, why does the parsha of Shema, the first paragraph, come before the paragraph of V'Hayayim Shemoah? And it said the reason is that you accept the yoke of heaven before you accept the yoke of mitzvos. The first paragraph of Shema describes the oneness of Hashem and loving Hashem with all your heart and all your soul. It's accepting the yoke of heaven upon yourself. And then V'Hayayim Shemoah, Al Kol Mitzvosai, is about listening to the mitzvos, accepting the yoke of mitzvos. And it says, why is V'Hayayim Shemoah before Vayomer? And it said, because V'Hayayim Shemoah is general mitzvos, is applicable both by day and by night, while Vayomer, which is tzitzis, is only applicable by night. Says the Gemara, Tanya. We're learning a brisa. Reb Shimon ben Yochai Yomer. Reb Shimon ben Yochai says, B'dimu sheyaktiv Shema leV'Hayayim Shemoah. It's fitting, it's proper that Shema should come before V'Hayayim Shemoah. Why? Now he gives a different reason. Shezeh lilmod v'zeh lelamed. Because Shema talks about learning. Shema talks about v'dibarta bam, you should speak of words of Torah, you should learn Torah. And V'Haya is about teaching. V'limadtem osam es b'nechem, you should teach your children. So what comes first, learning or teaching? Learning has to come before teaching. So Shema has to come before V'Haya. And V'Hayayim Shemoah leVayomer, V'Hayayim Shemoah should come before Vayomer, shezeh lilmod v'zeh lasos. Because first you teach and then you do, then people can do if you teach them. And the last paragraph of Shema deals with mitzvos, tzitzis, doing mitzvos. Now ask the Gemara, what do you mean? Atu Shema lilmod ispe lelamed v'lasos lespe. Does the first paragraph of Shema only deal with learning? It doesn't deal with teaching or doing mitzvos. V'aksiv, it says, in addition to v'dibartam, you should speak of them. It says v'shinatam levanecha, you should teach it to your children. And it says ukshartam, you should tie your tefillin on, chsaftam, you should write mezuzos. So it has all 3. It has teaching. It has learning. It has teaching, and it has doing mitzvos. Why did we say that the first paragraph has learning? It has learning, teaching, and doing mitzvos. And furthermore, V'Hayayim Shemoah, the second paragraph of Shema, Lilamed hu de'ispe v'lasos lespe. It only has teaching, V'limadtam osam es b'nechem. It doesn't have doing, it doesn't have mitzvos. V'aksiv, it says, Ukshartam, you should tie tefillin, uchsaftam, you should write mezuzos. So, what do we mean that the second paragraph has teaching, and the third paragraph has mitzvos? The second paragraph also has mitzvos. So, this is what it should really say. Shema should come before V'Haya, because because Shema has all 3. It has learning, it has teaching, and it has doing. V'Hayayim Shemoah leVayomer, and V'Hayayim Shemoah should come before Vayomer. Because V'Haya has both teaching and doing mitzvos. Vayomer ing ba elo lasos bilvad. And Vayomer only has doing mitzvos, the mitzvah of tzitzis. Okay, so this was Reb Shimon bar Yochai's explanation for the order, why Shema should be in the order that it is. Ask the Gemara, but typically with Reb Yeshua ben Karcha. Let him say the reason of Reb Yeshua ben Karcha, the reason from our Mishnah. The reason that we mentioned before, that first you have to accept the yoke of heaven before you accept the yoke of mitzvos, and V'Haya is before Vayomer because it has mitzvos that are day and night, and Vayomer is only in the daytime. Says the Gemara, you're right. Chada va'od kamar. He's really saying one and another. There's multiple reasons. Chada, first of all, like the Mishnah said, that the reason Shema is first is so that you accept the yoke of heaven first. And then you accept the yoke of mitzvos. The ode, but also I'll give you another reason. Mishum de ispa hanimi liachra naisa, because it has this other reason, which is that Shema has learning, teaching, and doing, and Vahaya only has teaching and doing, and Vayomer only has doing. Okay. One time, Rav Mashi Yadei V'Kar Kriya Shema V'Anach Tefillin V'Tzali. One time, Rav washed his hands, he read Shema, then he put on his tefillin, and then he davened. Shmona Esrei. Ask the Gemara, how could he have done that? The question is going to be, how could he put on his tefillin? How could he say Shema before he puts on his tefillin? V'hatanya, we're learning a brisa. Hachofer kuch l'meis b'kever. If a person is digging out a kuch, a grave, I think it's like a grave on the side of the mountain, I believe. So, but you're involved in burying the dead. Pater mikriya shema u'mingat tefillah u'mingat tefillin. U'mikol mitzvah samurs patara. While you're involved in the mitzvah of burying the dead, osik b'mitzvah, pater mingat mitzvah, you're exempt from other mitzvahs. You're pater, you're exempt from shema and tefillah, shmona esrei, tefillin, and all the mitzvahs. Higiyaz man kriya shema. If the time for shema comes, olav v'notel yadav, he should come out. He should wash his hands. U'maniach tefillin, he should put on tefillin, v'kar kriya shema. And then read Shema u'misbalel. And then he should daven. Now, before we present the problem with Rav who did it in a different order, Hagufa Kashya. This brisa itself is self-contradictory. Reisha Amar Pater. First it says, if you're digging a grave for a mace, for a dead body, you're involved in a mitzvah, you're exempt from all these mitzvahs. And then it says he should come out and do all the mitzvahs. I thought he's exempt. Says the Gemara Halo Kasha. This is not a contradiction. Seifa betrayed Reisha b'chad. The Seifa which says you should come out is where there's two people doing it. They're taking turns, so you should come out when it's not your turn. Reisha b'chad. The Reisha was where you're the only one doing it, then you're exempt. Fine. Mikol makom kashya l'Rav. But still, it's a question on Rav. Rav put on tefillin. He said Shema and then he put on tefillin. And this brisa says you should put on tefillin first and then say Shema. Says the Gemara, Rav Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha svirle. No, Rav holds like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha from our Mishnah. Da Amar, who said, O machus shamayim tchila v'achar o mitzvos. That first you have to accept the yoke of heaven, and then you have to accept the yoke of mitzvos. So first you have to say Shema, accept the yoke of heaven, and then you put on your tefillin, then you do the mitzvah of putting on tefillin, accept the yoke of mitzvos. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Eimar to Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha lahakdim kriya l'kriya. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha was talking about what you should recite first. He said that you should recite the acceptance of the yoke of heaven before you recite the acceptance of the yoke of mitzvos. But kriya l'asiya mi shamasle. But did he say that you should recite the acceptance of the yoke of heaven before you do the mitzvah? No, that he never said. That's an extension. And you're trying to say that you should first say Shema and then put on tefillin because you should accept the yoke of heaven and then do the mitzvah. That he never said. Pursuing furthermore, Misaber like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, is that an answer to our question? Rav holds like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, and you do the mitzvah of tefillin before you say Shema. You say Shema before you do the mitzvah of tefillin. The Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi, but Rav Chia bar Ashi said, Zimnin Sagin Hava Kamin Kamed Rav. Many times I was standing before Rav, Umakdim Umashiyade, he would get up, he would wash his hands, Umavarich, and he would say Brachos. Umasting on Pirkin, right? Brachos including Birkas Torah. Then he would teach us our daily parak. Umanach tefillin, and he would put on tefillin. The Hadar Kari Kriya Shema, and then he would say Shema. So many times, usually Rav would put on tefillin and then say Shema. So clearly he held that you're supposed to put on tefillin before you say Shema. And our case where we are asking about was an exception where he first said Shema and then put on tefillin. That's where it seems. V'chitema, now maybe you'll say, no. those times that he said that he those times that he put on tefillin before he said Shema was b'delo matizman kriya Shema. Maybe that was because it wasn't yet time for Shema. It happens to be that the time for Shema is the same as the time for tefillin, ideal time. So it's a little bit of a difficult suggestion, but maybe he put on tefillin before Shema because it just wasn't time for Shema. But maybe really he held that it should be afterwards. Well, in Cain, if that's true, that really holds that tefillin should be put on after Shema, and the only reason he did it those times before Shema was because it wasn't yet time for Shema, then Maya Sadase de Rav Chia bar Ashi, then what exactly is Rav Chia bar Ashi coming to teach me? What's the message here that he put on tefillin before Shema, if the only reason he did that was because it wasn't yet time for Shema? That doesn't really tell me anything. Okay, so I'll tell you what his testimony was. He was trying to tell you something else. So maybe he was coming to teach me something else. Maybe he was telling me that there's an opinion that you don't say Birkas HaTorah before you teach Mishnah. Well, Rav, as we said, he would say Brachos Birkas HaTorah, and he would then teach Mishnah. So you see that Rav held you say Birkas HaTorah before you teach Mishnah, before you learn Mishnah. That's what this testimony about what Rav would do was for. And the Chiddush, the novelty, was not that he would say Shema, to put on tefillin before he said Shema, because maybe he only did that because it wasn't yet time for Shema. Okay. Ash says the Gemara, Mikol Makom Kashya l'Rav, but still, we still have a problem because we still have the Brisa, and the Brisa said that tefillin should come before Shema. So why did Rav that one time say Shema and then put on his tefillin? Says the Gemara, Shluchahu da'avis. You know what happened? Somebody was bringing Rav his tefillin, and he was delayed. His shliach, his messenger, was delayed in bringing him his tefillin, and it was getting too late to say Shema. It was going to be the time for Kriya Shema. So that's why he said Shema before he put on his tefillin, because he didn't have his tefillin yet, that one time. But if you have your tefillin, then you should put on your tefillin before you say Shema. And that's what the next Gemara says. Amar Ula says, Kol hakara Kriya Shema below tefillin. If you read Shema without putting on your tefillin, Ki'ilu me'esh edu sheker ba'atzmo. It's as if you're giving a false testimony. Now, literally, it says about yourself. Rashi says that it really means to say about Hashem. You're giving a false testimony about Hashem. You're testifying about Hashem's mitzvos and accepting the yoke of heaven and the yoke of mitzvos, and you're not even putting on tefillin. That's a false testimony about Hashem. Alternatively, again, literally the words mean ba'atzmo, about yourself. So it could be your Talmidei Rabbeinu Yonah say, you're saying that you have a mitzvah of putting on tefillin, and yet you're not putting on tefillin. It's a false testimony about yourself. So you're supposed to put on your tefillin before you say Shema. Rav Chia bar Abba, Rav Yochanan. Rav Chia bar Abba says the name of Rav Yochanan, Kilu hikriv ola b'la mincha. It's like bringing a carbon ola, a burnt offering, an elevation offering without a mincha, without a flour offering accompanying it. Now, every ola, I think, or almost every ola, is accompanied by a carbon mincha. V'zevach bo nesachim, it's like bringing a different carbon, it could be a carbon ola too, but without nesachim, without libations, wine libations, which certainly for an ola, every ola is accompanied by wine libations, and the point is that it's like half the thing. You're bringing, every ola is accompanied by a mincha and by wine, and so if you bring an ola without those, it's like it's only half the mitzvah in a certain sense. So if you say Shema, you do the mitzvah Shema, but you're not wearing tefillin, He's saying it's a half deed. You get, of course, you fulfill the mitzvah of Shema. It's not that tefillin is required to fulfill the mitzvah of Shema, but it's a half-hearted way of fulfilling it because you're missing the crown of tefillin. You're missing the acceptance of mitzvahs upon your head as you read the Shema. So ideally, one should be wearing their tefillin when they say the Shema. Again, this is talking about the morning Shema, the evening Shema. You don't wear tefillin at night. It's not the time for the mitzvah, so there's nothing lacking by not wearing tefillin at the time of the Shema. Specifically in the morning, when one says Shema, they should be wearing their tefillin.